Can I ask you a personal question?
Uh-huh.
What got you so involved in learning this?
In learning what?
Oh, this about where you come from and your genes and all that.
Well, Clint got really into the 23andMe when it first came out, I guess 2.5 years ago. It was just interesting, like, where are we from? I mean, and when he bought it for me, we joked. I said, I've always been told I'm 100% Mexican. So, as I'm like filling the little tube with my spit, I was like, it's just going to come back with like Mexico, and that I'll just, there we have it. And then when it came out, and I learned that I was actually more European than Mexican. That was shocking to me. I guess I hadn't put together, even though I had joked about it and I learned about colonialism, I hadn't put it together that genetically I could be more genetically one over the other because I identify so much with being Mexican.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I started to get more interested in anti-racism work, I guess, learning how white supremacy is really rooted in colonialism, it became more of a interest, I don't know, to learn within myself that I'm made of opposing ideologies. Like I am made from both the colonizer and the colonized.
I had to leave home so I could find myself, find my own interest, intrinsic nature buried under the personality that had been imposed on me. Of both I cannot separate. Both are alive and true within me.
So why were you invested in getting me to do 23andMe?
I don't remember, but I think it was for the same reasons that I wanted. Discovery or confirmation or clarification of ancestry. And because your family history probably has even what I think even a more romanticized oral story of your family, of like the Miles name and where you all come from. I just wanted you to, I guess, take the test to see if what you heard may fit the story.
And as we found out, it did not. I mean, it did and it didn't.
It did and it didn't.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Conversations with My Parents, episode 3. In this episode, I am going to attempt to cover my genetic report after spitting into a tube and look to see where my saliva says that I am from genetically. My interest in bringing this up actually comes from my husband, who was really into these mail-in kits when they first started to come out, and found it super interesting, as did I. And in fact, when I received my results, my mom was visiting because it was near my daughter's birthday. And as I got them, I've always been told I'm 100% Mexican, whatever that means. I've always been like, you're 100% Mexican, you're 100% Mexican. And then I opened my results and it was like 60% European. So to my surprise and to my mom's surprise, I was 60% European. I'm 69.4% European. Split between Southern European, Spanish and Portuguese, with a little bit of Italian, broadly Southern European, and Ashkenazi. I have 1% Ashkenazi DNA. I'm Spanish and Portuguese. I'm like colonizer and colonized. That's the story within my DNA. And at the time, my mother, we have a joke in our family that I can make her angry pretty quickly. And she got really upset and she was like, no, you're 100% Mexican. And she walked downstairs to my basement where her room was. And I didn't realize really what this meant, what the 100% Mexican belief of our family and what the 60% European heritage meant, right? Until I started to really unpack or research for this project that it meant that I had both European, Spanish, and indigenous, Mexican, indigenous genetics in me. So I come from a colonized land. I mean, that's, anyone who is indigenous is coming from a colonized peoples and having to face the hard truth of what that means, that I'm not 100% Mexican. I'm Spanish, Portuguese, and indigenous. I'm not fully Mexican. I'm not American. So this idea of border, right? That I'm from the border, that I'm actually both. And there's a very specific peoples that comes from this border, this third space that isn't of one or the other, but is of both. And so I've really come to accept and love and be proud of the fact that I am a fronteriza. I am a border person. And I now see it as a gift. Anyway, that's a lot to cover. We'll see where we get to. Thanks for listening to Conversations with My Parents. What is your relationship to your European heritage? Like, do you know much about your European heritage?
Do I know it? I don't know anything about my European heritage, other than I know that the Spaniards were the ones that came across and settled in Mexico, and we're, Mexican, so therefore we've got a lot of Spanish blood in it.
And do you identify more with the Spanish blood, or the indigenous Mexican blood? Or both, half, even, Stephen?
I think I relate to both. I don't know what percentage, but yeah, I know I've got Indian blood in me. Native American, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you.
No, there are different races in Mexico.
Yeah.
You had the Incas and you had different tribes. Just like in the United States, there were different tribes. So.
Right. And do you know what tribe that you come from?
No.
I'm trying to figure that out. The indigenous blood from the DNA test, the 23andMe, tells me like what region of Mexico, and it's like Torreon, but it's actually Nuevo Laredo, or like right around Monterrey, is where a lot of my DNA is come from, like the indigenous blood. So I've been trying to research what indigenous tribes were from there.
That's easy to look up. You can look up what tribes were in this area.
Yeah. Yeah, I found it super interesting that it's not like it's from where you went back to. Like, you are actually around where we are from.
Right. Well, that's where Pinocho came from. He was born in Nuevo Laredo. So, and, he's got the hook nose. So, he probably had a lot of Indian blood in him, besides the Spanish blood.
The hook nose? Is that what you call this?
Yeah, you don't have it as bad as Faye Carol.
Yeah, Aunt Carol has that. No, I don't. But yes. I do have it a little bit, but not a lot.
Right. So, those are traits that came from the Native Americans.
If you would talk to me more about your thoughts around what being Mexican is, or being like having the Mexican heritage. What does that mean? My dad's laughing at me for you listening.
To me?
Yeah.
It actually means that the Hispanics, I don't want to say Mexicans, because I think most Hispanics are more touchy-feely type people. They embrace more, and they're not as cold. I think a lot of the Anglo-Saxons are more cold as far as with other people. I don't know how to explain it. Hispanics are more close, especially the family unit, and with their friends, they're more close. They hug and kiss and whatever. When you say hi.
Yeah, so it's like the physical contact, the cultural difference of physical contact, right? But like, then what separates? Great. So what then separates as you're calling Hispanics, which I'm curious, why are you saying Hispanics as opposed to like Mexican or Latin Americans?
Well, Latin American would be Hispanic. I just, Mexican, it means Mexico only. And Mexico is a mixture of races that come from, Spain, and probably a little bit of French in there, and the Native American. So I like to use Hispanic because that probably means more, or that is closer to what it really is.
What does Hispanic mean to you?
It means all your people that originated from Spain, which would include your Cubans, your Puerto Ricans, your, people from Mexico, from Colombia, from Peru, from South and Central America.
And you feel a kinship with all of those people regardless of country?
I'm sorry?
Do you feel a kinship with all of those people regardless of country?
Yeah, I think that they're all Hispanics.
I think in my memory we went to visit Spain, went to Europe first before I got the results of my 23andMe. And I remember being in Spain, in Madrid, and just the feeling of finding myself at home, which I have only ever had in Mexico when I lived there. Like, or anytime I go to Mexico, I feel like, mi tierra, like my home, this is where I'm from. And so having that again pop up in Spain was interesting. And then walking around through the Central Park in Madrid, I remembered looking down and like feeling it with my feet. I was like, the pavement had the exact same feel as the pavement in Mexico. And saying that aloud to Clint and being like, it feels like Mexican pavement. It's a different feeling. It's not like American pavement. It's a different feeling. But then I think about like what does it mean to me to be 100% Mexican? Like, what does that mean? Again, that phrase that has always been told to me by both of my parents, you're 100% Mexican. I'm 100% Mexican. It means to me, I guess it gives me a physical place to be like, this is what I am. This is where I'm from. These are where my roots are. Deeply, like the sand running through my fingers, from El Paso. It's just like, there's nothing like that's my home. I also immediately think of, like, I even think about it when Clint asked me if I wanted to move to Spain, I immediately think like about body type, because my body type is so different. I have the indigenous, or what I've learned to know as like Mexican indigenous body type. Like I'm squattier, I'm a little bit rounder. So there's this like in Mexico, I look around and I see people like me. I'm like, yes, hello. So there's that like looking alike that goes along with being 100% Mexican. I wonder if you would share with me what it means to be Mexican to you, or like of Mexican heritage, descent.
What does it mean to me?
Yeah.
I always have felt that I was born Mexican by accident. Another one of God's jokes.
What do you mean by that, Mom?
Well, just because I don't agree with a lot of things Mexicans do.
Like what?
But that,
Like what?
their politics, for one. Their politics. The machismo. There is still very much in play in the Mexican culture.
The patriarchy.
Yeah, no, and the fact that men still think that they're the only ones that can do things.
Yeah, patriarchy.
A lot of men. I shouldn't say all of them, but I would dare say 99.9.
But that's here too. That's not specific to Mexico. That's a worldwide problem.
Oh, but it's more prevalent in Mexico.
Okay. Is there any part of yourself that does identify, or that it celebrates, or is happy that you are from this culture or heritage?
Yeah.
What part?
I like the fact that I speak 2 languages. I like the fact that I got the best out of the Mexican culture and brought it here and blended it with the American culture.
And what is the best of the Mexican culture? What are those things that you're proud of? What are those things that you brought in and blended?
Well, the rich history that Mexico has, the fact that my grandfather was in the military and that his cousin was president of the country, so I'm proud of that. The food, the music, I still like to watch a lot of them. Well, Hispanic shows, not necessarily Mexican shows on Netflix.
And when you
I like it in Spanish.
You like Spanish shows, like from Spain?
From Spain, from Colombia has some really good shows.
Mm-hmm. And when you say Hispanic, what do you mean?
Well, not necessarily just Mexican, but Hispanic. That a Hispanic person speaks the language of Spanish, but grew up in different parts of South America, Central America, North America with Mexico. And each section has their own identities within the Hispanic umbrella.
I had to leave home so I could find myself, find my own interest, intrinsic nature buried under the personality that had been imposed on me. I kept the ground of my own being. My almost instinctive urge to communicate, to speak, to write about life on the border, life in the shadows. And on my way, largo camino me queda, I had to have a reckoning. Contempló quién soy, con quién era, with myself. Mirarme en el espejo. Analizar mi pasado, my history, my past, and who I am to become. Nunca estoy sola. Siempre había alguien que me guiar para crecer. A 1,950-mile-long open wound dividing up brothers. A culture running down the length of my body, staking fence rods in my flesh, splits me. Me raja. How do you wrap your mind around, realize, and accept? La herida en la espalda no se ve, pero sí se siente. Fully embrace the fact that you, la sangre del enemigo, te asusta. Lo que te asusta más es el sangre tuyo que tiene los dos. That you are both the occupier and the occupied. Me raja. The conqueror and the conquered. Te miras en el espejo y empiezas a ver la raza del opresor y del oprimido mezclado. What does it even mean? ¿Qué haces con tu sangre violenta? La aflicción quedará contigo como un hechizo. No importa su edad, vas a sanarla o darle a tu hija. I carry the wounds of my people. I carry the sins of my people. Imaginarías que alguien cansará de este peso. Es una carga vieja. Of both I cannot separate. Both are alive and true within me.
Will you tell me why originally you were interested Why'd you get so excited about 23andMe or your DNA?
Probably my access to passed down family history was ending, if not had already ended. With my mom dying, and then my grandmother, and then my aunt. And I think I was just looking for, I don't know, answers to questions I haven't even asked, but just to confirm my background.
And what were those questions?
What is my makeup culturally, and where are my ancestors from?
And what did you learn?
Well, I learned that a lot of the shared history about at least my mom's side, for whatever reason, seemed to be a little romanticized. There was talk about somebody, maybe a soldier, if I can remember correctly, either coming from Portugal or Spain and ending up in Southeast Asia, China, I believe it was, and meeting someone there, a woman, then immigrating to the Philippines at some point, and then basically that was the start of like my mom's nuclear family on her mother's side.
What's the name of that? What's their name? Was it the Muru?
No, that would have been the Quirantes.
Quirantes.
Yeah. And for a family who might be listening to this in the future, you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but that's part of the issue with oral history that's passed down. It's like a game of telephone. So that's what I recall. And again, that's why I wanted to utilize 23andMe to see if any of that was true in some way.
And was it?
No, it wasn't. So 23andMe pretty much split me in half between Western Europe and Southeast Asia. So Western Europe, not including Portugal or Spain. So that part of the story had to have been false.
Not including Portugal or Spain?
Yeah.
You have no Spanish blood in you?
I have 0, according to 23andMe.
You have 0 Spanish blood in you?
0.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, as far as European, that left me with what I think I already knew from my dad's side, which is German, but also French and Scottish, English.
And then what's your other 50%?
Actually 51.2%.
You are really split down the middle.
I am. So that's mostly Filipino,
Hooray!
including many of the islands in the Philippines, and Chinese.
Interesting.
And a little bit of, what they call broadly Chinese and Southeast Asian. So, yeah.
And what do they call the Filipino? So, like, you're, like, indigenous and Filipino. Like, you have no... I mean, except for the half part that's... We assume it's from your dad.
Right, but when we say... I think when we're categorized as East Asian, it includes... I don't know, the same category of indigenous American, only for those who, would have landed on this side of the Pacific all those thousands of years ago, with the same shared genetic history as folks that came from Southeast Asia, Madagascar, and yeah, that's what I can tell. Yeah.
And what was it like to find this out?
Well, I mean, this has been... It continuously gets uncovered more and more as more people submit their saliva to 23andMe so that they can better match, make adjustments to your ancestry composition. Because I remember in the beginning, I had Northern Scandinavian in my genetic makeup, but that has since gone away as it's been fine-tuned. So I'm no longer Swedish.
Only in your heart. It was interesting when I was talking to my dad this Sunday. I think I told you a little bit about this. He identifies being Hispanic with the culture, right, which is broadly through a lot of colonized countries. And then I was being devil's advocate, and I brought up, well, what about Filipino? They were also colonized by the Spanish. I think that's how Clint and I hit it off, or one of the many reasons why we did.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad said, well, he said something broadly like that you or Filipinos in general would identify more with the Hispanic culture than, in his words, were Oriental. I think he meant Asian. And I said, well, I don't know, Dad. I'm going to have to ask Clint that. And so here I am asking you, like, when you think of yourself, how do you identify?
I identify, let's see, on a form, obviously I have to check more than one box. Usually I can check Caucasian, and I can check, I'm trying to remember what it would be. Asian? Yeah, I think it usually just be Asian, because they separate Pacific Islanders specifically from Asian, because that's a different genetic composition. I can appreciate that. Or identify as multicultural. Yeah, those would be the two main ways I would identify.
Caucasian, Asian.
Or multiculti.
Or multiculti. But like just broadly Asian, you're just like, yeah, I'm Asian. Because that's a very broad term.
It is broadly
Hispanic.
Asian. Exactly, like Hispanic. Yeah, I mean, if it's maybe the forms that are more fine-tuned offer boxes like Filipino. Like they give you an opportunity to be more specific on what you are.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I would identify as Filipino in conversation with somebody if they had asked.
Do people ask?
Oh, sure.
What do they ask when they ask you that?
What are you?
Where
are you from?
And you say?
Well, to be blunt, and this was probably in the past growing up more so than as an adult. But I would say I'm from enter whatever state I was living in at the time, or I'm an American, or because I almost felt like I knew where they were going with that question.
Sure.
As if I had to explain my reason for being there.
Because where are you from?
I am from the Midwest, I would say.
You were born in?
I was born outside of Chicago in Illinois, and then we quickly moved to Wisconsin, southeast Wisconsin, and then moved to Ohio. So I feel like that encompasses
where you're from.
A lot of the Midwest.
Sure.
Yeah.
And people would always ask you where you were from or what you were.
Or what I was, yeah. Or they would guess for me. Ask if I was Hawaiian or Native American, Chinese, Japanese. Yeah.
You are a little bit Chinese.
I am. Not knowing at the time, though. You take offense when you don't believe that you have that in your background.
Because you identify with Filipino, because your mom was.
Exactly,
from
Filipino.
The Philippines.
Yeah. So I would not have identified and still don't identify as Chinese. Yeah.
We realize the similarities in our cultures, Mexican, Filipino, how we identify because of our mothers.
Mm-hmm.
Once we started dating, or as a friendship grew and we started dating, we started to realize the similarities in our cultures, and even in planning our wedding, how some of the dishes are named the same, some of the flavors are really similar, and even in meeting our separate mothers together, just the similarity in our mothers. Our mothers got along famously. And it is because those similarities in our cultures that are nowhere near each other on the globe, is because of colonization, because of Spain and the Inquisition. Right? So colonization makes us the same. Do you have any feelings?
We were bonded through colonization.
We're bonded through colonization, but we're bonded through more than that now. We're bonded through life. Yeah. But do you think about that?
I do think about that. At least I thought about it more growing up. Probably in middle school, I started to question Catholicism.
You questioned Catholicism in middle school?
Well, it was probably later middle school, when whatever point that I learned that, or put it together that the Philippines was essentially conquered by Spain. And with that, forced conversion to a new religion. And sitting in a Catholic church with my very Roman Catholic mother, wondering why are we celebrating? Why am I here? Why do we do this? It felt wrong, but it also, because I was a middle schooler, I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be in church. So, that was part of it too. But I also thought deeper than that, about celebrating a religion that was forced upon my ancestors, her ancestors.
That's incredible.
So that's where I went with colonization at that age, and obviously I have never forgotten about that.
So there you have it. Episode 3. It is my pleasure to leave you with the brilliance of my husband, Clint Lindhorst. I'm floored by his deep thinking ways, because it makes me think about how I was always such an obedient child and did what I was told. I think a lot of this process, these conversations with myself, with my parents, with my husband, my friends, the reason I started this project, Fronteriza, with my theater company, was a coming of age. This has been a coming of age for me. A deep dive into myself that the pandemic with our quarantine invited, and the curtain being pulled back on it all, on everything, has really made me go interior and investigate what kind of person I want to be, what kind of world I want to live in, how I want to show up and help to make that happen. Not only for me, for my peers, but for the future generations. I feel cheesy saying that, but it's true. But for my child, for my friends' kids, for everyone. I think these conversations, this opportunity to listen to myself, to the words of Gloria Anzaldúa, whom we shared with you in this episode from her book, Borderlands, La Frontera, how listening to my ancestors, my mom, my dad, and my chosen family, my spouse, how that has all changed me. Thanks, friends. Thanks, family. Thanks, anyone who is listening, whether I know you or not. Thanks for helping me show up. We have one more episode, just one more on this journey, where we have a family conversation. Not just me and my parents, but a generational conversation where Clint, myself, our daughter, talk to both my mom and my dad about all of the topics we've covered. So I hope that you will join us as we attempt one more recorded conversation with my parents.